Australia has spent decades building a reputation most countries would kill for. Melbourne laneways with 3-table cafes that outcoffee entire international brands. Baristas treated like tradespeople, not minimum wage extras. A flat white that, depending on who you ask, was either invented here or in New Zealand, and Australians will fight you either way. So, here's the uncomfortable part. Some of the biggest names pouring that coffee every single day aren't protecting that reputation. They're quietly eroding it. One franchise agreement, one marketing fund, one squeezed out independent roaster at a time. This isn't a hit piece on people getting their morning fix from wherever's closest. It's a look at 10 chains whose business models are doing real, measurable damage to the wider industry. Counted down from mildest to worst, followed by 3 that prove you can scale a coffee business without gutting what made it worth drinking in the first place. Before any brand gets named, it's worth being specific about what damaging the industry actually means here, because it's not just the coffee tasted average. 3 things count. First, sourcing and quality shortcuts that customers are paying specialty prices for without getting a specialty product. Second, franchise and business practices that squeeze independent operators and even squeeze the chain's own franchisees, thinning out the diversity that makes a coffee scene worth having. Third, marketing that overstates freshness, origin, or premium quality in a way that misleads rather than informs. Scale matters too. A single underperforming cafe is a bad Tuesday. The same behavior repeated across 200, 400, 1,000 locations is a structural problem, and structural problems are what actually shift an industry's trajectory. With that lens set, here's where the countdown begins, starting with the chains doing the least damage on this list and working toward the one doing the most. Coming in at number 10 is Donut King, and it earns its spot less through dramatic scandal and all through what it represents. It's a bakery and snacks chain where coffee is bolted on rather than built in, run under the same parent company, Retail Food Group, that owns several other names on this list. That matters because it's a pattern you'll keep seeing. A business built for volume and shelf-stable product first, coffee quality second. It's not the worst cup in the country. It's just proof that when coffee becomes an accessory to a donut menu, quality control on the espresso machine tends to slide down the priority list. Number 9 is Hudson's Coffee, a name a lot of people recognize from airports, train stations, and hospital foyers, more than from choosing it on the street. That's not an accident. Hudson's has built its footprint around captive audience locations, places where the alternative is walking 20 minutes with luggage or skipping caffeine entirely. When a business model leans on convenience monopolies rather than competing on taste against the cafe next door, the incentive to keep improving the product weakens. You don't need to outcoffee anyone when you're the only stall between a traveler and their gate. At number 8, Jamaica Blue follows a similar script to Donut King in that it's part of a bakery-cafe hybrid, part of the Food Co group, competing on breakfast menus and cabinet food as much as espresso. Reviews of the coffee itself are consistently middle of the road, which sounds harmless until you remember these are the kinds of chains setting a huge number of Australians' baseline expectation for what a normal flat white should taste like. Mediocrity at scale isn't neutral. It resets the bar downward for everyone underneath it. Number 7 is Soul Origin, a chain that markets itself heavily around health-conscious, on-the-go breakfast and lunch, with coffee again treated as a supporting product rather than the main event. It's grown fast through food courts and CBD strips, which is exactly the expansion pattern that tends to outpace quality control. Fast full-print growth and consistent barista training don't scale at the same speed, and coffee's usually the thing that suffers first because customers notice a soggy sandwich faster than they notice a slightly over-extracted shot. Sitting at number 6 is Cibour Espresso, a South Australian favourite that built genuine goodwill over years of consistent cafe-style service. The reason it's on this list isn't its history, it's its recent ownership change. Cibour was acquired by Retail Food Group in late 2024, the same parent company behind several other names already mentioned. RFG's track record with acquired brands is well documented, and it isn't reassuring. This is exactly the kind of consolidation moment that Section 1's criteria was built to flag. Not a chain doing damage yet, but one that's just being folded into a group with a demonstrated pattern of prioritizing fees and margins over the franchisees actually pulling shots. Number 5 is The Coffee Club, And this one stings a bit more because it's genuinely Australian. Founded in Brisbane back in 1989, and it's the country's largest homegrown cafe franchise by a wide margin. That size is exactly the problem. Running a full breakfast to dinner menu across 200 plus domestic locations means coffee competes for kitchen attention with everything from pasta to all-day brunch. Bigger menu, bigger overhead, more moving parts for a barista to manage during a rush, and coffee quality that reviewers consistently describe as reliable rather than remarkable. Reliable isn't damage on its own, but when the country's biggest local chain sets reliable as the ceiling instead of the floor, it drags the whole category's ambition down with it. At number 4, Zarepha's Coffee built its entire identity around the drive-through model, and the trade-off there is blunt. Speed is the product. A drive-through queue moving efficiently depends on consistency and turnaround time, not on a barista taking an extra 15 seconds to dial in a shot that's running slightly fast. It's a legitimate business model that clearly works for a lot of people, but it's also a model that structurally deprioritizes the exact craft variables that separate a good coffee from a forgettable one. Number 3 belongs to Starbucks Australia, and its story here is almost the opposite of the others, which is what makes it interesting. Starbucks has never fully cracked the Australian market the way it has almost everywhere else, and Australia's own baristas and industry figures have said so publicly for years. The company's own local leadership has acknowledged it had to stop chasing the mainstream, inner-city customer base and instead lean into international students, tourists, and outer suburban drive-through traffic where the brand hasn't already lost the trust battle. It earns a spot on this list not because it's uniquely bad, but because it represents the clearest case of a global chain trying to import a formula into a market with its own deeply held standards, and treating that mismatch as a marketing problem to route around rather than a quality bar to meet. Number 2 is McCafe, and by sheer scale, this is the single biggest coffee operation in the country, with well over 1,000 locations serving coffee to more Australians on a daily basis than any other name on this list combined. That scale is precisely the issue. Even food and beverage critics who acknowledge McCafe's convenience and low price point note it consistently trails specialty independence on bean quality. When one operation is responsible for that much of the nation's daily coffee intake, trails on quality isn't a minor asterisk. It's shaping the default coffee experience for a huge share of the country, and it's doing it through a business built primarily around burgers and fries, where coffee will always be the secondary product, no matter how much marketing budget goes into cold brew campaigns. Which brings us to number 1, and this one isn't about a single bad cup of coffee at all. It's about what happens to an entire industry when a franchisor treats its own operators the way this next brand's parent company has. Gloria Jean's Coffees is owned by Retail Food Group, the same conglomerate behind Donut King, SIBO, Brumby's Bakery, and Michelle's Patisserie. RFG's conduct has been the subject of an Australian parliamentary inquiry, which concluded the company had damaged the reputation of franchising in this country and referred its dealings to the competition watchdog for investigation. Between 2011 and 2018, RFG opened over 1,000 new outlets across its brands and closed more than 1,100, a churn pattern the inquiry itself questioned the viability of. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission separately took legal action alleging RFG sold or licensed dozens of loss-making corporate stores to incoming franchisees without disclosing they were unprofitable and misused marketing fund contributions, in one case allegedly diverting around $22 million toward non-marketing expenses. That case settled with roughly $10 million in repayments and debt waivers to affected franchises. A related brand under the same parent, Michelle's Patisserie, was hit with its own class action from more than 130 franchisees over forced frozen food changes that reportedly wrecked their store reputations. A dispute that ended with Michelle's being discontinued as a brand entirely in 2025. None of that is speculation. It's parliamentary record, ACCC findings, and court filings. And it's why Gloria Jean's tops this list. The damage here isn't a flat white that's slightly bitter. It's a business model that, according to regulators and lawmakers themselves, has hollowed out the trust and financial security of the very people running the stores while squeezing the space where independent coffee businesses might otherwise have grown. So is this 10 unlucky companies or something bigger? Look back across the list and a shape starts to appear. Coffee treated as a side product to bakery or fast food. Locations chosen for captive audiences instead of competition. Fast-growing footprints outpacing barista training. Consolidation under a parent company with a documented history of prioritizing fees over franchisees. A drive-through model built for throughput, not craft. A global brand importing a formula the local market never fully accepted. And at the very top, a franchisor whose own regulators say it damaged the reputation of the entire franchising industry. The common thread isn't bad luck. It's scale outrunning care, again and again, because margin pressure rewards consistency and throughput far more than it rewards the extra 90 seconds a barista needs to get a shot right. Here's the part that actually matters though, none of that is inevitable. 3 Australian names prove a coffee business can grow and still get better instead of worse. Toby's Estate is the clearest counterexample on this entire list. Founded in Sydney in 2001, it built its model around direct trade relationships with farmers rather than buying through anonymous commodity channels, and that sourcing discipline paid off in a very public way. Its flagship Sydney café was named the world's best coffee shop at the 2025 World's 100 Best Coffee Shops event in Madrid. A ranking built from input by thousands of coffee professionals and enthusiasts globally. It's grown to more than 70 stores across 8 countries, which proves the point outright. Expansion and quality aren't actually opposites, they're a choice. Campos Coffee is the second name worth knowing, and it built its reputation the harder way, through direct relationships with growers rather than relying purely on brand marketing to sell a premium story. That sourcing model gives Campos control over quality at the farm level, instead of just at the roastery, which is exactly the accountability that's been missing from several chains higher up this list. The third is ONA Coffee, founded in Canberra by former Olympic handballer turned barista Sasha Richaspiuk, which has built one of the most detailed single-origin sourcing programs in the country through its own farmer partnership initiative. Its cafes treat the coffee list less like a drinks menu and more like a wine list, with tasting notes and origin details laid out for anyone curious enough to ask, which says a lot about a business, betting that customers actually want that information rather than just wanting caffeine fast. What connects all three isn't luck or a bigger marketing budget. It's a decision, made early and kept as they grew, to treat sourcing transparency and grower relationships as the product itself rather than a footnote on a menu board. The real takeaway from all of this isn't boycott 10 brands and only drink from 3. It's that the damage described across this whole list wasn't caused by one bad company having a bad year. It's a pattern that repeats itself every time a coffee business decides scale matters more than the people growing the beans or pulling the shots. And it's a pattern that 3 very different Australian names have proven doesn't have to happen. If you made it this far, you've probably already started mentally auditing your own regular order, and that's honestly the point. Drop a comment on which chain surprised you most, or which local independent deserves a spotlight next, because the next video on this channel might just be built entirely from your suggestions.